The day I found the receipt from Tiffany's was the same day I had spent 8 hours preparing his mother's secret lasagna recipe. It wasn't even my birthday. It wasn't our anniversary. The small blue box wasn't meant for me. I remember standing in our kitchen, the kitchen I had scrubbed clean every Sunday for 15 years, holding that small piece of paper between my trembling fingers. The evening light streamed through the windows, catching the dust particles floating in the air. Dust that would settle again, no matter how many times I cleaned. Like a fool, I tucked the receipt back into his jacket pocket. Then I wiped my hands on my apron and continued cutting vegetables for the salad that would accompany his mother's lasagna, his favorite meal. The meal I had prepared countless times because it made him smile in a way I rarely saw anymore. My name is Rebecca Mitchell, and for 15 years, I was the perfect wife to David. I cooked gourmet meals, kept an immaculate home, supported his career, and pushed my own dreams aside. I believed that's what a good wife did. I believed that's what love was. I was wrong. But let me start from the beginning. I met David during my final year of culinary school. I had dreams of opening my own restaurant, a small bistro with a seasonal menu and local ingredients. David was a regular at the cafe where I worked part-time. He was handsome, confident, and 8 years older than me, already established in his career as a financial advisor. "You're talented," he told me one evening after I prepared a special off-menu dish for him. "You could cook for celebrities with skills like these." His compliments made me blush. His attention made me feel special. When he asked me out, I said yes immediately. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Expensive restaurants, weekend getaways, flowers delivered to my apartment. 6 months later, he proposed. A year after our first date, we were married. "You don't need to work anymore," he said after the honeymoon. "I make more than enough for both of us." I hesitated. "But what about my restaurant?" He laughed, not unkindly, or so I thought at the time. "Why would you want all that stress? You can cook whatever you want at home. Besides, most restaurants fail within the first year." It made sense when he explained it. He was older, wiser, more experienced in the ways of the world. And wasn't it every girl's dream to marry a successful man who could provide for her? My mother certainly thought so. "You've hit the jackpot, Rebecca," she said. "Don't mess this up with silly dreams." So I became a housewife. I threw myself into creating the perfect home for David. I took cooking classes to expand my repertoire. I joined a book club with other wives in our suburban neighborhood. I redecorated our house until it looked like something from a magazine. The first 5 years were good. David came home every night for dinner. He complimented my cooking. He brought me gifts, nothing extravagant but thoughtful little things. A cookbook I'd mentioned wanting, a new set of kitchen knives, flowers on our anniversary. Things began to change in our 6th year of marriage. David started working later. Dinner would grow cold waiting for him. Sometimes he wouldn't come home until I was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. "It's just a busy period," he'd say. "This new client is demanding, but the commission will be worth it." I believed him because I wanted to, because the alternative was too painful to consider. The late nights became more frequent. The weekend getaways stopped. Our conversations grew shorter, focused only on practical matters. "How was your day?" "Fine." "What's for dinner?" "Lasagna." "Did you pick up my dry cleaning?" "Yes." By our 10th anniversary, we were living parallel lives in the same house. I cooked meals he rarely ate with me. I cleaned rooms he merely passed through. I bought clothes to impress a man who hardly looked at me anymore. "Is everything okay between you and David?" my friend Lisa asked during one of our book club meetings. The others had already left, and we were finishing the last of the wine. "Of course," I said automatically. "He's just busy with work." Lisa gave me a look that was both pitying and knowing. "For 3 years straight?" I changed the subject. Lisa was divorced. What did she know about making a marriage work? But her question lingered in my mind. Was everything okay? Had it ever been? That night, I tried to initiate intimacy with David for the first time in months. He claimed he was too tired from work. "Maybe this weekend," he said, turning away from me. The weekend came and went. He spent most of it catching up on emails in his home office, the door firmly closed. On our 12th anniversary, David forgot entirely. I made a reservation at the restaurant where we'd had our first date. I bought a new dress. I spent hours on my hair and makeup. At 7:30 p.m., I called his office. His secretary sounded surprised. "Mr. Mitchell left at 5 today." He said he had plans with his wife. My heart raced. Maybe he was planning a surprise. Maybe he was picking up flowers or a gift. By 9 p.m. I knew he wasn't coming. I canceled the reservation, changed out of my dress and washed off my makeup. When he finally came home at midnight, his collar was smudged with lipstick that wasn't mine. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Client dinner," he said smoothly. "You should have gone to bed. You didn't need to wait up." I stared at his collar. He followed my gaze, touching the spot briefly before looking back at me with a practiced expression of confusion. "I had marinara sauce at dinner," he said. "I'll take this to the dry cleaners tomorrow." Marinara sauce. The excuse was so absurd that I almost laughed. Instead, I nodded and went to bed. The next morning, I checked his credit card statement online. Dinner for two at Le Cirque, a hotel room downtown. I closed the laptop and made breakfast like nothing had happened. Why didn't I confront him? Why didn't I leave? The answers aren't simple. Fear. Denial. The comfort of routine. The terror of starting over at 35. The shame of admitting my marriage was a failure. So I continued my life as David's wife. I cooked. I cleaned. I smiled at his colleagues during dinner parties. I pretended not to notice when he came home smelling of unfamiliar perfume. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "Marriage is hard work, Rebecca. No one has a perfect relationship." But was this even a relationship anymore? 3 more years passed in this half-life. I found more evidence. Receipts for jewelry I never received, hotel charges in our hometown, text messages that he quickly deleted when I entered the room. Each discovery was like a small cut, painful but not quite enough to make me leave. Until the day of the Tiffany's receipt. It was David's 45th birthday. I had spent the entire day preparing his favorite meal. His mother's lasagna, made from scratch with homemade pasta sheets and a sauce that simmered for hours. I had baked his favorite chocolate cake. I had cleaned the house until it gleamed. While hanging his jacket in the closet, I felt something in the pocket. The receipt was for a diamond necklace worth more than my entire wardrobe. The date of purchase was 3 days earlier. As I mentioned, I put the receipt back and continued with dinner preparations. David arrived home at 7, kissed me absently on the cheek, and announced that his colleagues were taking him out for drinks later. "But I made your mother's lasagna," I said. "And chocolate cake." He barely looked at the food I'd spent all day preparing. "We can have it tomorrow. Jenkins made reservations at that new steakhouse everyone's talking about. Can't you go for just one drink after dinner?" I asked, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "I've been cooking all day." David sighed, checking his watch. "Fine. Let's eat quickly." We sat at our dining room table, the one I polished weekly with lemon oil. David ate rapidly, barely tasting the food, checking his phone between bites. "This is good," he said automatically, the same thing he always said regardless of what I cooked. "I made the pasta from scratch," I told him, seeking some acknowledgement of my effort. He responded, not looking up from his phone. I watched him eat the food I had poured my heart into, and something inside me shifted. A small crack appeared in the carefully constructed facade of our marriage, of my life. "Who's the necklace for?" I asked quietly. David's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What necklace?" "The one from Tiffany's. The one that cost $4,000. He set down his fork deliberately, his expression transitioning from surprise to controlled neutrality. I had seen this transformation many times, whenever I came close to uncovering his secrets. "It's a surprise," he said smoothly, "for our anniversary next month." Our anniversary was in May. It was February. "Our anniversary is in May," I said. David waved his hand dismissively. "You know what I mean. It's for you, obviously. Why are you going through my pockets?" "I wasn't. I was hanging up your jacket." "Well, you've ruined the surprise now." He checked his watch again. "I need to go. The guys are waiting." He stood up, leaving half his food untouched. The cake remained uncut in the kitchen. "Don't wait up," he said, not looking at me as he grabbed his jacket. The front door closed behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded final. I sat alone at our dining table, surrounded by the food I'd spent hours preparing, the candles slowly burning down. I thought about the woman who would receive that necklace. Was she younger? More beautiful? More interesting? Did he look at her the way he used to look at me? For the first time in years, I allowed myself to really feel the pain of my marriage. Not just the dull ache I had grown accustomed to, but the sharp, searing agony of betrayal, of wasted years, of dreams abandoned. I cried until there were no tears left. Then I did something I had never done before. I left the dishes unwashed. I left the food out on the table. I went upstairs, took a sleeping pill, and went to bed. The next morning, David was gone before I woke up. The dining room was exactly as I had left it, evidence that he had not come home at all. I called Lisa. "Can you meet for coffee?" I asked. Now. She sounded surprised. In 15 years of friendship, I had never asked her for an impromptu meeting. "Yes, please." We met at a small cafe downtown, far from our neighborhood where we might be seen by other wives in our circle. "I think David is having an affair," I said as soon as we sat down. Lisa looked at me with such gentleness that I knew instantly she had suspected this for years. "How do you know?" I told her everything. The late nights, the forgotten anniversary, the lipstick on his collar, the receipts, and finally the Tiffany's necklace. "What should I do?" I asked when I had finished. Lisa reached across the table and took my hand. "What do you want to do?" The question startled me. For 15 years I had not considered what I wanted. I had only thought about what David wanted, what a good wife should do, what would keep my marriage intact. "I don't know," I admitted. "Then that's the first thing you need to figure out," Lisa said. "Not what you should do, but what you want to do." I spent the next week in a daze, going through the motions of my life while my mind worked through Lisa's question. What did I want? Did I want to confront David? Did I want to save our marriage? Did I want to leave? Did I even remember how to want things for myself? During that week, David's behavior didn't change. He came home late. He barely spoke to me. He spent the weekend working in his home office. Nothing had changed except me. I was watching now, really watching instead of pretending not to see. On Friday night, David announced he had a business trip the following week. "Where?" I asked. "Chicago. Client meetings." I nodded, continuing to fold laundry. "When do you leave?" "Sunday afternoon. I'll be back Thursday night." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Our anniversary was on Wednesday. After he went to sleep, I checked his laptop while he was snoring beside me. His password had been the same for years. His mother's maiden name followed by his birth year. Amateur. His email revealed the truth. He had booked a romantic getaway to a beachfront resort in Cabo San Lucas. Not Chicago. And the reservation was for Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell. I was Mrs. Mitchell. But I wasn't going to Cabo. For the first time, I felt something beyond pain and sadness. I felt rage. White-hot, clarifying rage. I closed the laptop and returned it to his nightstand. Then I lay awake until dawn making plans. On Saturday, I was the perfect wife. I made David's favorite breakfast. I did the laundry he would need for his business trip. I didn't ask questions. I didn't show any signs of suspicion. On Sunday morning, while David was at the gym, I called a locksmith and scheduled an appointment for later that day. I called a lawyer and made an appointment for Monday morning. I went to the bank and withdrew half the money from our joint savings account. When David left for the airport, I kissed him goodbye like I always did. I told him to have a good trip. I said I'd see him on Thursday. As soon as his car turned the corner, I called the locksmith to come earlier. By evening, I had changed all the locks on our house. I had packed up most of David's clothes and personal items and stored them in the garage. I had canceled his credit cards, on which I was an authorized user with full access. Then I waited. On Monday morning, I met with the lawyer. I told her everything, the years of neglect, the evidence of affairs, the lie about Chicago. She advised me on the next steps, on how to protect myself financially and legally. "He's going to be angry," she warned me. "I know," I said. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of David's anger. On Wednesday, our anniversary, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. What the hell is going on? My cards aren't working and Rachel is furious. Call me now. Rachel. So that was her name. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to our favorite restaurant, the one where he had proposed, and had dinner by myself. I ordered champagne. I ordered dessert. I celebrated the end of my marriage and the beginning of my freedom. Thursday came, the day David was supposed to return. I took the day off from my newly acquired part-time job at a local bakery, a small step toward rekindling my culinary dreams. I wanted to be home when he arrived. At 6 in the evening, a taxi pulled up in front of our house. David got out, tanned from the Mexican sun, his face already set in an expression of fury. I watched from the living room window as he tried his key in the front door. As he tried again. As he began to pound on the door. I opened it calmly, standing in the entryway but not moving aside to let him in. "What the hell, Rebecca?" he demanded. "Why are the locks changed? Why are my credit cards canceled? I was stranded in Cabo." I smiled, a calm smile that seemed to unnerve him more than any shouting could have. "Who's Rachel?" His face went through a series of emotions: shock, anger, calculation, and finally, an attempt at innocence. "What are you talking about?" "Rachel," I repeated. "The woman you took to Cabo for our anniversary. The woman who's getting the Tiffany necklace. That Rachel." He switched tactics, his face softening into the charming expression that had once made me weak in the knees. "Becca, honey, this is all a misunderstanding. Rachel is a client. I was in Chicago on business." "Stop lying," I said, my voice steady. "I know everything. I've known for years. I just didn't want to admit it to myself." David's charm vanished, replaced by cold anger. "You've lost your mind. Let me in so we can talk about this like adults." I shook my head. "Your things are in the garage. You can take them and go. The locks will stay changed." "This is my house too," he said, his voice rising. "You can't keep me out of my own house." "Actually, I can," I said. "At least temporarily. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings." David's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Divorce? You're divorcing me? After everything I've done for you? I gave you this house, this life. You'd be nothing without me." His words hit me like a physical blow, but I didn't flinch. For years I had believed exactly that I would be nothing without David. That I owed him everything for the comfortable life he had provided. "I made dinner for you every night for 15 years, I said quietly. "I cleaned this house until it sparkled. I gave up my dreams for you. I gave you everything and you gave me lies." "This is ridiculous," David sputtered. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "So I took a business trip with a female client. To a romantic resort? On our anniversary." I laughed, a sound without humor. "Your clothes are in the garage. Take them and go." David stepped closer, his face contorted with rage. "You think you can do this to me? You think I'll let you get away with this?" I stood my ground, though my heart was pounding. "If you don't leave now, I'll call the police. I have a restraining order." This was a bluff. I didn't have a restraining order yet. But David didn't know that. He stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing me for the first time. Then he stepped back. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice low and threatening. "When the money runs out, when you realize you can't make it on your own, you'll come crawling back." "I won't," I said simply. I closed the door as he turned toward the garage. Through the window, I watched him throw his suitcases into the taxi. I watched the taxi drive away. Then I sat down on the couch and sobbed. Not from sadness but from relief. From the release of 15 years of tension. From the strange, terrifying exhilaration of standing up for myself. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, financial discussions, and calls from David alternating between threats and pleas. I let my lawyer handle most of it. I focused on rebuilding my life. I returned to the bakery, increasing my hours. The owner, a no-nonsense woman named Marta, took me under her wing. "You have talent," she told me after I created a new pastry that sold out in hours. "Real talent." The words were similar to what David had said when we first met, but coming from Marta, they felt different. They felt true. A month after David left, Lisa invited me to a dinner party at her house. I almost declined. The thought of socializing, of putting on a brave face and answering questions about my marriage, was exhausting. "Just a few friends," Lisa promised. "People who care about you. No judgment." I went, wearing a dress I had bought for myself, not one chosen to please David. Lisa's dining room was warm and inviting, filled with the scent of roasting chicken and the sound of laughter. 6 people sat around her table, Lisa, 3 other women from our book club, and 2 men I hadn't met before. Rebecca, this is my brother Michael and his friend Jack, Lisa said. They're both chefs. I thought you might have something in common. Jack, a tall man with kind eyes and flour under his fingernails, pulled out a chair for me. Lisa tells me you're a culinary school graduate? I was, I said. A long time ago. Cooking is like riding a bike, Jack said with a smile. You never really forget. Throughout dinner, Jack asked me about my favorite cuisines, my preferred techniques, the restaurants I admired. He listened to my answers with genuine interest. He didn't check his phone once. After dessert, he handed me a business card. I own a small bistro downtown. We're looking for a part-time pastry chef. If you're interested, come by for a trial shift. I took the card, my fingers trembling slightly. I haven't worked in a professional kitchen in 15 years. Jack shrugged. So you might be a little rusty. But talent doesn't disappear. Just think about it. As I drove home that night, I realized I was smiling. A real smile, not the polite one I had worn for years as David's wife. The next morning, I called the number on Jack's card. I'd like to come in for that trial shift, I said. Tomorrow at 2? Jack suggested. I thought about my life, the life I was rebuilding, the dreams I was reclaiming, the strength I was discovering. Tomorrow at 2, I confirmed. And for the first time in years, I felt something more powerful than pain, more sustaining than anger. I felt hope. I cooked and cleaned for 15 years while my husband cheated. Then I woke up and kicked him out. Part 2. The bistro kitchen was smaller than the ones I remembered from culinary school, but infinitely more inviting. Sunlight streamed through windows that faced a small herb garden. The walls were painted a warm yellow, and someone had pinned up hand-drawn sketches of seasonal menu items. It smelled of yeast and sugar and possibility. Jack greeted me with a casual wave, flour dusting his forearms. Welcome to Seasons. He gestured around the kitchen. Nothing fancy, but it's home. I stood awkwardly in the doorway, clutching my bag of personal knives, unearthed from the back of a closet the night before, polished until they gleamed. It's lovely. So, Jack said, wiping his hands on his apron. Lisa tells me you specialized in pastry at school? I nodded, suddenly unable to speak. What was I doing here? I was a 40-year-old housewife who hadn't worked in a professional kitchen in over a decade. David's voice echoed in my head. You'd be nothing without me. Hey! Jack's voice broke through my thoughts. You okay? I'm fine, I said automatically, the response I'd given for years whenever anyone asked me that question. Jack studied me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Look, I know this is probably overwhelming. Coming back to something after a long time away can be terrifying. But here's the thing, he gestured to a workstation set up with flour, sugar, butter, and basic equipment. Pastry doesn't care how long you've been gone. It just cares about how you treat it now. A lump formed in my throat. What if I've forgotten everything? He shrugged. Then we'll remember together. No pressure today, just make something you love. For a moment I stood frozen. Then slowly I unpacked my knives, tied on the apron Jack handed me, and approached the workstation. My hands remembered what my mind had forgotten. The feel of cold butter between my palms. The silky texture of flour sifted through my fingers. The rhythmic motion of kneading dough. With each passing minute, I grew more confident, falling into the familiar dance of baking. I made a simple French apple tart, nothing fancy, but a test of fundamental skills. Pot brisée for the crust, thinly sliced apples arranged in concentric circles, a glaze of apricot preserves to finish. Jack watched without commenting as I worked, occasionally nodding in approval. When I slid the tart into the oven, he smiled. You move like a chef. I used to be one, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. When the timer dinged, I removed a perfectly golden tart from the oven. The aroma of butter, caramelized sugar, and warm apples filled the kitchen. May I? Jack asked, gesturing to the tart. I nodded, holding my breath as he cut a small slice. He took a bite, closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at me with undisguised admiration. When can you start? My first official shift at Seasons was the following Monday. Jack introduced me to the small staff. A sous chef named Elena, 2 line cooks, Miguel and Tanya, and a dishwasher, Peter, who was working his way through college. Rebecca will be handling our pastry program, Jack announced. 3 days a week to start. They greeted me warmly, without the skepticism I had feared. No one asked why I was starting a career at 40. No one questioned my abilities or my place in their kitchen. That first day was physically grueling. By the end of my 8-hour shift, my feet throbbed, my back ached, and my hands were raw from washing them dozens of times. But when I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: pride. I had created something with my own hands. I had contributed to a team. I had been valued for my skills, not for how well I maintained a home or how presentable I was at David's work functions. The divorce proceedings dragged on. David fought me at every turn, determined to punish me for my betrayal, as if I were the one who had broken our vows. He contested the division of assets. He threatened to reveal embarrassing secrets about me to our friends if I didn't agree to his terms. What secrets? I asked my lawyer, genuinely confused. I've been a faithful wife for 15 years. She shrugged. It's a bluff. He's desperate. And he was. His girlfriend Rachel, I learned from mutual acquaintances, had left him once she realized he wasn't going to get the clean, easy divorce he had promised her. Once she understood that I wasn't going to quietly disappear. He's telling everyone you had a mental breakdown, Lisa informed me over coffee one weekend. That you imagined the affair. I should have been angry, but I found myself laughing. Let him. The people who matter know the truth. And they did. Our neighbors had seen the late-night arrivals, the unfamiliar cars parked down the street. David's colleagues had met Rachel at company functions where I wasn't invited. Even his own mother, when I called to explain why I wouldn't be at their annual family Christmas, had sighed deeply. I love my son, she said. But I know who he is. I'm sorry, Rebecca. Her apology meant more than I could express. Meanwhile, my life at Seasons gave me purpose. Jack increased my hours as word spread about the pastries and desserts now featured on the menu. Customers began asking if they could order whole cakes or tarts for special occasions. You need to raise your prices, I told Jack after a particularly busy Saturday night. People will pay more for quality. He looked at me with raised eyebrows. I thought you were the pastry chef, not the business manager. I could be both, I said boldly. The Rebecca of a year ago would never have spoken so directly to her boss. But I wasn't that Rebecca anymore. Jack considered this, then nodded. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Over dinner, maybe? Somewhere that's not this kitchen. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. Was he asking me out? The thought was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. I wasn't divorced yet. I wasn't ready. I was too old, too damaged, too. Just dinner, Jack said gently, as if reading my thoughts. Between colleagues. No pressure. I took a deep breath. Dinner would be nice. Dinner was nice. And so was the next one a week later. And the movie we saw the following weekend. Jack was patient, understanding that I was still untangling myself from 15 years of marriage, still discovering who I was outside of being David's wife. I like who you are, he told me one evening as we walked through the park after dinner. The Rebecca who speaks her mind. The Rebecca who creates beautiful things with her hands. The Rebecca who laughs without covering her mouth. I stopped walking. I do that. You used to, he said. Cover your laugh. Like you were embarrassed by your own joy. I hadn't realized David had taken even that from me. My unguarded laughter. How many other pieces of myself had I surrendered over the years? How many would I reclaim? 6 months after I changed the locks on David, our divorce was finalized. The settlement was fair. More than fair, according to my lawyer. David had finally realized that fighting me was costing him more, both financially and socially, than conceding. I kept the house, though I planned to sell it. Too many memories lurked in those rooms, too many years of silent suffering embedded in the walls. I received half of our joint investments in savings. I kept my car, my personal possessions, and a small alimony that would help me transition fully into my new career. The day the papers were signed, I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt strangely empty, as if a tumor that had been growing inside me for years had finally been removed. The absence of pain was disorienting. That evening, Jack and the Seasons staff threw me a small celebration. To new beginnings, Jack toasted, raising his glass. And to endings, I added, clinking my glass against his. Later, as we closed up the kitchen, Jack handed me a slim envelope. I was going to wait, but tonight seems appropriate. Inside was a business proposal. A plan to expand Seasons to include a separate bakery and cafe next door. The numbers were impeccable, the concept solid. But what made my heart race was the proposed name, Rebecca's Seasons. I don't understand, I said, looking up at him. This is your business. Jack shook his head. I'm a good chef, but you're a great pastry chef. And you're right, we could be charging more for quality. This would be a partnership. Equal stakes equal say. He paused. If you want it. Did I want it? The question echoed Lisa's words from months ago. What do you want? For so long I hadn't known. I had lost the ability to distinguish between my desires and what was expected of me. But standing in that kitchen, holding the blueprint for a future I had once dreamed of, I knew the answer with absolute certainty. Yes, I said. I want this. 1 year to the day after I found the Tiffany receipt, Rebecca's Seasons opened its doors. The space was everything I had imagined during those long-ago days in culinary school. Warm lighting, comfortable seating, display cases filled with pastries that were both beautiful and delicious. The grand opening was covered by a local food blogger, who raved about our chocolate eclairs and seasonal fruit galettes. By noon we had sold out of nearly everything. As I was preparing a fresh batch of croissant dough for the next day, the bell above the door jingled. I looked up, ready to inform the customer that we were closed for the day. It was David. He stood awkwardly by the door, looking both familiar and like a stranger. He had aged in the past year, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a slight softening of his jaw. Or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time in years. Rebecca, he said, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone he had always used with me. You look different. I straightened, wiping flour from my hands onto my chef's coat. My name was embroidered above the pocket. Rebecca Mitchell, Executive Pastry Chef. Hello, David, I said evenly. We're closed for the day. He gestured around the cafe. So this is what you've been doing. Lisa mentioned you were working at some restaurant. The casual dismissal in his voice would have wounded me once. Now it just reminded me of how little he had ever understood me. What do you want, David? I asked. He stepped closer and I caught a whiff of his cologne, the same brand he had worn throughout our marriage. Once that scent had made my heart race. Now it just smelled artificial. I wanted to see how you were doing, he said. It's been a year since everything. I'm doing well, I said simply. I can see that. He glanced around again, his expression calculating. I recognized that look. He was assessing value, measuring worth. This place must have cost a fortune to set up. I had a good divorce settlement, I said, allowing myself a small smile. David flinched. Yes, well, about that. I've been thinking. He paused, clearing his throat. Things didn't have to end the way they did. We had 15 years together. That counts for something. I waited, sensing there was more. Rachel and I. It didn't work out, he continued. She wasn't. Well, she wasn't you. There it was. David wasn't here to check on me. He was here because his affair had fallen apart, and he was retreating to the safety of what he knew. The wife who had always forgiven him, always accommodated him, always put his needs first. I'm seeing someone, I said, the words coming out before I had fully formed the thought. Jack and I hadn't put a label on our relationship, but we had been exclusive for months. He made me laugh. He valued my opinions. He saw me, really saw me. David's expression hardened. Already? The divorce isn't even cold. The marriage was cold long before the divorce, I replied. For a moment I saw genuine hurt in his eyes, and I felt a flicker of the old guilt, the instinct to comfort him, to make things right. But then I remembered the years of loneliness, the forgotten anniversaries, the lipstick on his collar, the Tiffany necklace meant for another woman. I should go, David said stiffly. Yes, I agreed. He turned to leave but paused at the door. You really have changed, Rebecca. I looked at him steadily. Yes, I have. But I'm actually just becoming who I always was. Who I was before I started believing I was nothing without you. After he left, I returned to my croissant dough. methodically folding butter into the layers of pastry. Each fold was a meditation, a reminder of the patience required to create something beautiful. A year ago, I had been a woman who didn't know what she wanted. Now I was a woman who had built a life on her own terms. The bell above the door jingled again, and Jack walked in, carrying a bottle of champagne. "Thought we should celebrate a successful opening," he said, then noticed my expression. "Everything okay?" I considered telling him about David's visit but decided against it. David belonged to my past. Jack, this bakery, the life I was creating, they were my future. "Everything is perfect," I said and meant it. Jack smiled, setting down the champagne to wrap his arms around me. "You have flour on your nose," he said, gently brushing it away. "Hazard of the profession," I replied, leaning into his embrace. Later that night, as we sat in the empty cafe sharing champagne and the last of the day's pastries, Jack raised his glass in a toast. "To Rebecca's seasons," he said. I clinked my glass against his. "To all seasons," I amended. "The bitter and the sweet." Because I had learned that life, like baking, required both. The tartness of lemon to balance the sugar. The salt that enhances caramel. The bitter chocolate that makes the sweet cream sing. In the year since I had found that Tiffany receipt, I had experienced fear, anger, grief, and loneliness. But I had also discovered strength, purpose, friendship, and joy. I had learned that I was capable of building a life on my own terms, that I could leave behind what no longer served me and create something new. As I looked around the cafe, my cafe, I thought about all the women like me, trapped in lives that were slowly suffocating them. Women who cooked and cleaned and sacrificed, believing that was what love required. Women who had forgotten what they wanted, or had never been allowed to consider the question at all. I hoped some of them would find their way to Rebecca's seasons. I hoped they would taste my pastries and feel, even briefly, the pure pleasure that comes from something made with care and skill and love. I hoped they would look at me, a 41-year-old woman who had started over, and see that it was possible to write a new story for themselves. And I hoped, most of all, that they would remember how to recognize their own hunger, and how to feed it. 2 years later, I stood in the expanded kitchen of Rebecca's Seasons, supervising a staff of 3 pastry assistants. We had outgrown our original space within 18 months, and had taken over the entire building. The cafe now served breakfast and lunch in addition to our pastries and desserts. There was often a line out the door on weekend mornings. My cookbook, Seasons of Sweetness, sat prominently on a display near the register. It had started as a collection of recipes for our most popular items, compiled at the urging of regular customers. A local publisher had picked it up, and to everyone's surprise but Jack's, it had become a regional bestseller. "You always knew what people craved," Jack had said when we received the first copies. "Not just their appetites but their hearts." We had married in a simple ceremony in the cafe 6 months earlier. Lisa was my maid of honor. My mother, who had once told me not to mess up my marriage to David with silly dreams, had cried with genuine happiness as she hugged me. "I was wrong," she had whispered in my ear. "I'm so proud of you, Rebecca." David had remarried as well, a younger woman who worked in his office. I wished them well sincerely. I no longer carried anger toward him, only a distant sadness for the years we had both wasted pretending. As I finished decorating a wedding cake for a Saturday delivery, I thought about how different my life was now from what I had imagined it would be when I married David at 24. I had believed that love meant sacrifice, that marriage meant submission, that a woman's worth was measured by how well she served others. Now I knew that true love enhanced rather than diminished. That partnership meant equality, that my worth was intrinsic, not dependent on what I could do for others. The bell above the door jingled and Jack walked in, returning from a meeting with our produce suppliers. He kissed me lightly, careful not to disturb my work on the cake. "Beautiful," he said, admiring the delicate sugar flowers I had arranged along the tiers. "Thank you," I replied, stepping back to assess the overall effect. "I wasn't talking about the cake," Jack said with a wink. "Though that's nice too." I laughed, no longer covering my mouth, no longer apologizing for taking up space or making noise or being seen. That evening, as we closed up the cafe together, I paused to look around at what we had built. Not just the physical space, but the community that had formed around it. The regular customers who knew each other by name. The staff who felt more like family than employees. The life that had seemed impossible just 3 years ago. "What are you thinking?" Jack asked, slipping his arm around my waist. I leaned into him, grateful for his warmth, his steadiness, his respect. "I'm thinking about recipes," I said. "For the cafe?" I shook my head. "For life. How sometimes you have to throw out the old one completely and start fresh. How sometimes the most important ingredient is courage." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "And sometimes it's patience. Knowing when to wait and when to act. And love," I added. "Not the kind that diminishes you, but the kind that helps you rise." Like a perfect soufflé, I thought but didn't say. The chemistry had to be right. The timing had to be precise. And you had to trust the process, even when you couldn't see what was happening inside the oven. "Ready to go home?" Jack asked. Home. Not the pristine showcase I had maintained for David, but the cozy farmhouse Jack and I had bought together. A place with a large kitchen and a garden where I grew herbs for the cafe. A place where flour dusted the countertops and recipe books filled the shelves. A place where I could be myself, fully and without apology. "Yes," I said, taking his hand. "I'm ready." As we walked out into the cool evening air, I thought about the woman I had been 3 years ago. Standing in a kitchen holding a receipt for a necklace that wasn't meant for her. How scared she had been. How small she had felt. I wished I could tell her what lay ahead. The pain, yes, but also the joy. The fear, but also the freedom. The ending of one story, but the beginning of another. Better, truer, more authentic. I wished I could tell her that sometimes the most courageous thing a woman can do is ask herself what she wants, and then give herself permission to pursue it. But perhaps she had known all along. Perhaps that moment in the kitchen, with the Tiffany receipt trembling between her fingers, had been the first step on a journey she had been preparing for her entire life. A journey that had led me here, to this moment, walking hand in hand with a man who saw me clearly, leaving a business I had built with my own hands, heading toward a home where I belonged completely. I squeezed Jack's hand, feeling the solid warmth of his palm against mine. "What?" he asked, smiling down at me. "Nothing," I said. "Everything." And it was true. After 15 years of cooking and cleaning for a man who had betrayed me, I had finally learned to nourish myself. After a lifetime of putting others first, I had discovered that caring for myself allowed me to care more deeply, more authentically, for those who truly deserved it. It wasn't selfish. It was essential. Like butter and pastry, like salt and caramel. Like the precise balance of ingredients that transforms simple components into something magnificent. The recipe for a life well lived.